Good afternoon. So I keep hearing from people and the news and just statistically or whatever the mainstream narrative or what's being reported and wherever it is, social media, whatnot. This idea of that it's all 2020 and into 2021. It's all about saving lives. And there's even this statistic that COVID has a 99% survival rate, and a bunch of people jump on and say, well, 1%, that's intolerable for me. They do the math on 1% of the population or multiply it over 10 years or whatever and say, all these millions will die. This is the theory and what's being promoted. All the lockdowns, all this stuff is being done to save lives. That's the mantra: save lives, save lives. So I look at, well, what is actually killing people? Like, what's the, if we look up the causes of death for 2020 and what the numbers actually say, COVID is listed at number 3 with 345,000, and this is in the U.S. And the 1 and 2 are almost double what COVID is, and it's been this way year after year after year. The number 1 is heart disease or cardiovascular disease. It's usually a bunch of stuff linked together. And then number 2 is cancer. Now, if we go further down the list, in 2020, COVID was number 3, and then unintentional injuries is on there at number 4, and that number has been relatively similar or static for a long, long time in all the charts I've seen. And then it's, back to stroke, respiratory, Alzheimer, diabetes, and then down below that, get into flu, kidney disease, and then suicides at the bottom. And then, from the charts I've seen, going back 50, 70 years, since the 50s maybe, that heart disease has been number 1. And it's been number 1 by a huge margin for a long time. So I'm like, all these folks that are saying it's all about saving lives, it's all about saving lives. Where have you been for the last 50 years? The American Heart Association has this chart or this graph that plots diseases of the heart, and a similar graph that says cardiovascular disease. And on both these charts, if we go back to 1900, it's really close to 0. It was a non-existent thing. It wasn't a health problem. It wasn't the number 1 thing that people were worried about. And then if we look at the chart, it goes up and up and up and peaks somewhere around 1970, and then it stays high into the present, or there's a slight decline going into 2011. But it's, still the number 1 cause of death is heart disease and cardiovascular disease. If it's all about saving lives, why now? Why in 2020? In 2019, way more people died of cardiovascular disease than did COVID, double, so like and then in 2020 here in California, they shut down restaurants. And I saw soda fountains were shut down, and the thought was that people would refill their sodas and spread germs or spread the virus and would get everybody sick. So we had to ban the soda fountains. Well, diabetes and heart disease and the sugar disease has been around for decades. Millions of people have died. Millions of people are suffering. If they can shut down sugar and corn syrup in these fountains for COVID, why haven't they shut it down all these other years? Why hasn't Coca-Cola been sued into bankruptcy? Why hasn't, Pepsi, Coke, Red Bull, all the candy bar makers and manufacturers, why haven't they been banned and shut down? Why is every supermarket in America at the checkout counter have candy bars and all kinds of processed garbage that's proven killer? Why hasn't that been banned? And I go back to that chart that says back in the 1900s, in America, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, non-existent. Wasn't a problem, wasn't even a thing. And then for me, to dig deeper and go into to reinforce the proof of this, if we look at hunter-gatherers, you can look it up. Hunter-gatherers and either heart disease or cardiovascular disease or diabetes or even cancer, they don't have it. It's never been a problem. Yeah, cancer's been in our body forever and ever, but as far as like being a thing that kills a lot of people in their community, it's not a thing. So if we look to hunter-gatherers, we looked at tribal people, the cure for cardiovascular disease is there. It's known. They don't have it. It's not a problem. So if we really care about saving lives, then why haven't we adopted their lifestyle? The cure is there. Why haven't all these big agra and big sugar businesses and all this, processed toxic food, why haven't they been shut down? Why are they still allowed to keep going if they're killing all these people year after year after year? If we look at how hunter and gatherers lived, if we look at how these tribal people that do not have these diseases live, we can see the clues. We can see what they eat, and they don't eat sugar. They do have a sweet tooth. They eat raw honey like it's their job, like raw honey. They love it. Could probably eat as much as they could if they can get. And so if we want to solve the problem, we ban sugar, ban all this fake processed garbage, and let everyone, mandate that everyone becomes a beekeeper, make everyone get flowers and put them in their yard that attract bees. There's this whole, I've heard about this bee problem where bees are dying off. Well, we can solve two problems at once. We can solve the sugar disease and get people healthy by having everyone become a beekeeper and start eating raw honey. Let that be the sweetener of choice. Like all these sugar drinks at the store that have all this stuff in them, just ban them. If we can ban restaurants, if we can ban people from being close to each other, if we can make people wear masks, why can't we make them do other stuff that are healthy? And I'm not advocating any of this. I'm just pointing out that this whole narrative that it's all about saving lives is BS. If it was about saving lives, where have they been for the last 50 years when millions of people have died and they haven't done anything about it? Quite the opposite. Coca-Cola, all these sugar companies, all these companies that are promoting unhealthy, toxic substances, they're in bed with the government. It's been that way forever. That's how it works. Big business and big government get together and to make profit. That's how the system works. So this whole idea about saving lives, it falls apart so easily. That's what's so frustrating. The narrative is so easily challenged and so easily dismissed as being a crock. But yet people still buy it. Like what? Like how is that possible? I'm not in favor of the government coming in or whoever it is and telling people what to do and mandating from above. Top down, it doesn't work. It never has. It always leads to corruption and all kinds of problems, and especially to unintended consequences. That's almost always been the case. But I am a fan of communities coming together and saying, hey, let's get healthy. Let's decide if we want to let in McDonald's or Coca-Cola or whatever candy bars. Do we want to have that in our community? Do we want to have a sedentary lifestyle where we sit on our butts all day and don't do anything, and then we're dropping dead of diabetes and cardiovascular problems and getting cancer and all these things? The other big thing, if the government, the counties have been the ones pushing the mask mandates. They're the ones that come out with the rules, at least here in California, of what we have to do, the distancing, the mask, the house arrest, whatever it is. Well, they're also the same people that issue the zoning, that decide whether or not we can live in community or not live in community, as in whether a property or land is zoned single-family residence or multifamily residence. And the vast majority of housing out there is zoned single-family residence. If anyone wanted to build a community, even their backyard, or a developer wanted to come in and build a bunch of communities, they'd have to get the zoning changed because it's just not, it's insane. It's crazy. That's the other thing with health, is that the hunter-gatherers and tribal people, they live together in community. That's part of the recipe for their health. If we go back and look at that chart, how from 1900 in America and other places, we have all these skyrocketing health problems. Well, one of the things that happened in the 1900s is we moved away from living together. We went from living in smaller houses, often multi-generations in a house, to this whole single-family American nuclear family kind of dream thing, where it's the 2.2 kids, there's the picket fence, living in a house by ourselves, isolated from our neighbors, and that is not in keeping with our biology, with how we evolved, how we're designed to live. And it's not rocket science to look at how in the last 100+ years we've deviated from our evolution, from what leads to human thriving, and then we have all these problems, all these diseases. So if we sum up how, there's that chart that shows in the 1900s, cancer, heart disease, all that goes up and just keeps on going up. And if we also look at what happened in the 1900s, We moved away from communal kind of living, more towards isolation. We moved from talking to each other face to face or even reading to television, radio, smartphones. The whole concept of a TV dinner where you take some processed food, prepackaged food, you put it in the oven or the microwave, toaster oven, whatever it was, and then we sit down, and instead of communicating with each other, we stare at the idiot box and we get programmed by whatever the programmers want us to hear. It doesn't take a genius to kind of look at the trajectory of where we've gone and why we're having so many health problems. And the other thing, like agriculturally, both ranching and farming, we went from smaller farms where most people are doing it, what would have been considered organic, but there wasn't a word for it back then because there wasn't a huge reliance on pesticides and steroids and hormones and all that stuff. But just, it was smaller farms. There's this chart that shows the history of farming the last 100+ years, and it shows the number of farmers decreases dramatically while the size of the farm goes up dramatically. So basically it went from a lot of small farms to just a handful of giant, humongous monocrop agriculture, big agribusiness and Monsanto and pesticides and all that. And it's like, look at the results, and they talk about yields went up, this and that, but multiplying and having more of bad food, of toxic food, how is that, progress? How is that success? I agree with the idea, the theme or whatever of saving lives, of being healthy and strong and protecting people. I'm all about it. And at the same time, the narrative or what's really being done isn't in line with that. It's just a slogan, it has no reality connected to what's, if we look at the outcome, it's not there. It's just rhetoric. So my appeal or my hope or my request is that invitation is that we look at how we used to live and glean the lessons, look at hunter-gatherers that are still around and see how healthy they are, how robust they are, and we re-adopt or reincorporated those ways. Like the answers are so easy. It's easy to do. We come together and we start living in a good way, and we'll all be healthy. It's simple. It's easy. We just need to wake up, to become aware, and to stop outsourcing our health, stop outsourcing everything that's important to us, and start that old saying, like, think global, act local kind of thing. Or I don't buy food from strangers. I saw, similar bumper sticker, but the whole, there's lots to be gained by coming back together. At the root of it all, we all want the same thing. We want to be healthy. We want our families to be healthy. We want our kids to be healthy. Everyone wants to be healthy and strong and feel good and loved. And so let's start doing that, locally together. I know we can do it. I believe we can do it. So thanks for watching.